Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our continuing discussion related to the Great Exchange. And we're looking at the entities that replaced Jacob with respect to the Assyrian captivity. Now, some individuals divide Jacob into Israel and Judah. However, we are just looking at Jacob as Jacob, whether we are talking about Israel or Judah, even though at different times you have these different trajectories for these apparently different groups. So anyway, what we're talking about right now, we're labeling this the Arabian Nights. And so this particular group that we are looking at, this group is the SEPHARVAIM, or the Sepharvite, or the SEPHARVI. And so these are the groups that also follow along with the Hamathites, or the Hamathi, the Kutha, the Ava. And so we're going to look at who these groups are in current times so that you can get a better understanding of who served as the replacements for Jacob and who continue to serve as the replacements for Jacob. And so we're just going to quickly look at the names of the people groups that serve as the SEPHARVAIM or the SEPHARVI. And those are identified, and this is not exclusive, so there are more. But for this particular discussion, we're looking at what is known as Aruba, Oroba, Aruba, Araba, Arabia, Yoruba, and Arabistan. It's important to reiterate that one of the reasons why we have so much historic confusion is because people have been encouraged to buy into these racial construct stereotypes about who was doing what, when, where, and how. And so there are assumptions about the roles that people were playing historically based upon phenotype. But as you know, you have individuals who were playing certain roles that were inconsistent with what would have been expected based upon their phenotype. And so these masks serve as a perfect example of what was going on in many instances. People have been fed this belief that all of these people running the slave trade, for instance, were these lighter people. But in some instances, you have individuals in the background, the brown individuals, running things with these individuals who had white faces, so to speak, serving as sort of the front person, the facade for the entire dynamic. And you had that going on with slavery. And so there tends to be a focus on what quote unquote white people were doing to the exclusion of what quote unquote black people were doing. And so you're going to see perhaps this issue come up as you have different groups of people demand reparations. Because in this demand for reparations, what will come up, as we've talked about before, is this issue of the true history of the people and the true roles that the people played in the transatlantic slave trade. So you will have more assertions about who served as the perpetrator and who the true victims were. So let's continue on here. So we're going to quickly revisit the biblical narrative about the role of the SEPHARVAIM in the exchange with Jacob. And so, of course, it's indicated in 2 Kings 17 that the SEPHARVAIM were placed in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel, and they possessed Samaria along with the other groups that have been noted, including Babylon. And if you recall the narrative, what was going on was when the individuals were brought into Samaria to replace Jacob, these individuals were basically doing the same thing. And so clergy was brought in order to teach them how to basically be Jacob. And so they were taught the religious practices, they were taught the cultural practices. However, these individuals practiced what was taught, but also continued to practice what they were practicing beforehand, and this included the SEPHARVAIM. And so one of the things to keep in mind with respect to the SEPHARVAIM is that they were the individuals known for passing the children through the fire and for making these offerings to actually two deities. One deity is Adramelech. The other one is Anamelech, and these were the gods of the SEPHARVAIM. So we're going to start off with the place name Aruba in the Americas. And so you have this island nation known as Aruba that was originally populated by a collective of Indians, also known as the Arawak. And so you know the narrative. The narrative is that the name of the island is obscure in terms of its origin. No one's quite clear about what it is. However, there is an offering that it is originally Aruba. And so in addition to this name, Aruba, you see this narrative about the Spanish. So in 1499, the Spanish went into Aruba, and they enslaved many of the inhabitants that were there. And then they sent them to Hispaniola to work in plantations and mines. And then some of them came back to Aruba in 1515. Now, this individual who came from Spain took over as the first governor of the island. And Aruba stayed under Spanish control, according to this, for 137 years before that control changed hands. And so you had a bit of diversity in terms of these colonizers. And so in trying to do a deconstruction and an etymology of this Aruba, what came up when looking at the original offering of Oruba was Spanish detected, but it indicated, do you mean Aruba? And so the little translator was not going to be tricked. And so you have here, when you look at the translation of the Aruba, which comes up as English detected. When you do the translation from Aruba into Somali, it comes up as Arabic. And so in Somali, Aruba is another word for Arabic. So essentially, the name of the island, the name of the nation, the name of the people, the names all come together as Arabic. And following along with the Somali, you have Aruba in the Turkish as Arabistan. You might have also noted with the Somali that there was a Karaba in the beginning of one of the translations. And here in the Latin, you see that Aruba is Araba. We're going to quickly look at the Strong's Concordance deconstructions of Aruba. And you see Aruba here with this interesting Strong's number. We have 6161. And it indicates that Aruba is a thing exchanged, a pledge, a token. Aruba has the same root as Arab, and it is indicated as a guarantor. And this name Aruba is associated with being a bondsman. And so Aruba is associated significantly with commerce and trade. It refers to bargains, exchange, and securities. And so you also have an interesting notation that this is referring to a feminine past participle of Anamelech. And so what we have here with Aruba or Yoruba or Oroba is this connection with Anamelech. And of course, Anamelech is this Assyrian deity that goes hand in hand with Adramelech. If you've done your homework, you already know who Adar is, and you know this is a depiction of Adramelech, also known as Little Prince Adar. And so Little Prince Adar has a donkey head with feathers coming out, has a part human body, and then is symbolized by the peacock. And sometimes when you see depictions of Adramelech and Anamelech, you see that it goes right along with the Sepharvites or the SEPHARVI. And so again, those groups, that collective known as the SEPHARVAIM, the SEPHARVI, that replaced Jacob, this was their deity. It was Anamelech, and then of course Adramelech. And it's indicated here that this is an Assyrian god. And here's an indication that there's a belief that there's a connection between Anamelech and Anu. And you also see where there's again this reference to Lot, because Anamelech is also associated with this idea of cover and concealing oneself and appearances. And so in this discussion, it also indicates that Adramelech, Anamelech, that these entities are associated with being intervening and obstructing, like a cloud. And when you think about cover, you think about cloud cover. And so you have this dynamic of sort of a concealed or obstructed identity. And it's noted here that this name Anamelech is of foreign origin. So even though you see it in the Hebrew, it is of foreign origin. As we wrap up this portion of the discussion of the Great Exchange with respect to Jacob, we see that in addition to the Hamathites or the Hamathi, that you have another group sort of masquerading as Jacob, and that group is the SEPHARVAIM or the SEPHARVITE or the SEPHARVI. And so you have large collectives of individuals that actually exist today that have taken on this identity of Jacob. Now, again, some people may not realize that they have taken on this identity, and it's just been passed down based upon tradition from generation to generation, and so they just accept it as their identity. However, one would expect with all of these Bible scholars and clergy that people would be calling attention to this dynamic, and also that people would not be doing these wholesale assumptions about who is and who is not Jacob, because you can see that this situation is quite complex. And so you have individuals who are identifying as Jacob or wearing the mantle of Jacob, but they are not in fact Jacob. And so it again creates quite a bit of confusion, but here you see yet another group, and of course there are other groups. And so of course you end with the thought of where exactly is Jacob. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care. See you soon.